What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome back to the Dapper Snapper Gaming channel, and welcome back to How Do I Want to Do This? This is our series where we take a look at all playable options available to players in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, then we rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 and either build them or fix them depending on how they rank. Now today we begin our talks on the Warlock class. Yes, we took a couple weeks off and we're getting the new draft league all started up, so draft analysis went up for that this past week. Week 1 goes up tomorrow, so make sure to check that out. But for today we are back on the D&D grind, and I am looking forward to doing that, which I know that a ton of you love the Warlock, and I'm excited to talk about it. But before we get into everything, make sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe if you haven't already. Also, make sure to share the video with your friends and click the bell so you're notified when new videos are uploaded. I haven't really mentioned it, but thank you so much for getting us to 4,500 subscribers. We are well on our way to the 5,000 mark by the end of this year, so thank you all so much to all of you who are both new and returning. You all are absolutely amazing. So what is a warlock, right? A warlock is the one that has sold his or her soul to some sort of deity, being, typically evil creature. Typically warlock is seen as somebody who's made a raw deal. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that the character is evil. There are plenty of characters who are warlocks that deal with evil beings but are not necessarily evil themselves. I've kind of made it pretty clear in past videos that I'm not a huge fan of playing evil characters, especially if you are more of an inexperienced player. I've been playing an evil character in my most recent campaign as we've gone through Wild Beyond the Witchlight. I liked the harsh dichotomy there, but you also have to find reasons to be a team player there, so that's why it's normally not recommended. But you don't have to do that here. You can be a quote-unquote good person and have a more neutral or good alignment while still being in cahoots kind of with something that's bad. How does it compare mechanically though to the other classes? That is what we look to find out today. Now, again, like I say in all of my general class rankings, this is very much an imperfect system because we have to remove subclasses from the ranking. Obviously, there is no such warlock out there that does not have a subclass from get, and so obviously this is not going to be representative necessarily of everything, but removing subclasses is the closest thing we can do to keeping it neutral on a class by class basis, and then obviously things will vary by viability of subclasses. There are 9 subclasses for the Warlock, and we will be going through all of those over the next 9 weeks, either building those or fixing them depending on their rankings. So without any further ado, let's jump right in. So at level 1, we get 2 things. Number 1, we get our otherworldly patron, which is our subclass. Again, we are skipping subclasses for this video, but every subclass will get a deep dive in subsequent weeks, so that's the last time we're going to mention it. At level 1 as well, we get Pact Magic, and this is something I want to take a little bit of time to explain, just because Pact Magic is seen as similar to spellcasting, but it has some very key differences, right? Normally I would skim over the spellcasting type of thing, but I want to kind of spend a little bit of time here just because there are some pretty stark differences. So obviously we get access to spells and we get a warlock spell list, right? And so you're wondering, okay, is this a prepared class or is this a learned class, right? This is a learned class with special rules. As far as cantrips go, they work pretty much the same as what you're used to. So we would have access to as many are on the respective table given our warlock level, so nothing too crazy there. However, when we get to the actual leveled spells, then things get a little bit weird. So we are going to have a very limited number of spell slots depending on our warlock level. At level 1, we're going to have 1 first level spell slot. That's it. That's all you get, right? So you got to use it very wisely. At 2nd level, we get a 2nd spell slot, which is huge. And savor it because you don't get another one until level 11. That's right, we have 2 spell slots until level 11. Now they do scale up accordingly with normal spell levels. So at level 3 you get 2nd level spell slots, at level 5 you get 3rd level spell slots, but again you still only have just the 2. So all of your spells are going to upcast automatically from 1st level up to 2nd, 3rd, 4th, whatever it happens to be, and that is what you got. That is all you got. At 11th level, of course, we finally get a third spell slot, and you get a fourth at level 17, and that's as much as you get. So very, very limited in how many of these spell slots we get. However, the one caveat that comes with this is we get them back on a short rest rather than a long rest. This is, of course, where the meme that warlocks are always sleepy and wanting to take naps, that's where that comes from. So it's very much true. We only get 4 cantrips throughout our entire journey, which is very, very few, and pretty much one of them is always going to be guaranteed to be a particular one, which we'll talk about here in just a second. But yeah, so it's very, very restrictive in what it allows you to do. However, the spell list is very helpful for the most part with these things. Again, we want to focus on spells that scale well because we're going to automatically be upcasting them whether we like it or not. While we're talking about it, I'm going to go ahead and just list some of my favorite spells from the Warlock spell list. Note that some of these will be more situational than some others, just depending on your build. And then of course we will go really in depth on what spells work best on our specific builds that we do throughout this series. Some of the big ones, of course, are going to be Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade, of course, allowing you to deal extra damage on a weapon attack. You have Eldritch Blast as the ultimate standout here. Very reliable damage. It's force damage. It scales very, very well, giving you extra beams as you reach key levels for cantrip scaling, which is pretty great. Lightning Lure is not bad. Thunderclap also not bad, and then Toll the Dead. If Toll the Dead wasn't overshadowed by the Eldritch Blast, then it would be good here, but Eldritch Blast is just better. For first level spells, Armor of Agathis is a really good standout here for the most part. There are some warlocks that don't really appreciate Armor of Agathis, but it is a really nice option as a more defensive, offensive option, I guess. You have ice all around you, and then you lash back out whenever you're hit. So that can be really nice if you can really beef it up, and so it does scale very well with your automatic upscaling, so that's pretty nice. Charm Person, Expeditious Retreat are 2 pretty standard ones. Hex is a really good one though as well. That is extra damage every turn, which is great, kind of like Hunter's Mark when we talked about the Ranger, which I'll put up in the icon above. But you get to actually target a specific type of ability check, and those are actually worse, so that's also really, really good. And there are a couple of others. Unseen Servant is a really good one. Do not take Witch Bolt. Witch Bolt is an absolute trap. It sounds really cool just because of the high damage die, but it is an absolute trap. That spell absolutely sucks. For second level spells, you've got a few that I like. Cloud of Daggers is generally a trap. I've made builds before that kind of make use of it. If you're able to push people into the Cloud of Daggers, then it's but most of the time probably not. Crown of Madness, of course, Enthrall, not bad. Hold Person, Invisibility. Mirror Image and Misty Step, both great options. Shadow Blade, if you're not going for some kind of other combination with something like Slasher or Crusher or something like that. Shatter, great damage, and then Suggestion for that outside of combat or even sometimes inside of combat. Either one can be useful there. For third level spells, we do get Counterspell, which is great, as well as Dispel Magic, Fly, Gaseous Form, Hypnotic Pattern. Hunger of Hadar is not bad. That's one that you don't see a bunch, but in the right situations, Hunger of Hadar absolutely can be useful there. And then Spirit Shroud is also a really good one. It's a nice aura that goes around you and gives some really nice benefits as well. And then we also get a few summon spells, which I really like. Your Summon Fae, Lesser Demons, Shadow Spawn, and Undead. All of those can work. If you use them correctly, then I definitely would recommend looking at that if it works with your build. Those all are really not bad. And the final one that I would recommend is Thunderstep as a nice mobility option, as well as some damage, which is pretty cool. Banishment and Blight come online at 4th level spells. I know Blight is not the best spell out there, but every now and then you bring that out and it can be great. Dimension Door, huge one. Really, really like that one. Hallucinatory Terrain, situational, but can be really good. Shadow of Moil, I think is better than what most people give it credit for, but what are you gonna do? And then we also get Summon Aberration and Summon Greater Demon in there. Summon Greater Demon is especially nice just because that summon is just a little bit beefier than what a lot of your other summons are. Hold Monster, of course, comes online on 5th level spells, as well as Synaptic Static and Teleportation Circle. Those are also very, very good. As 6th level spells and onward, I feel like it tends to kind of fall off a little bit, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that it changes how our spells work, and we will get to that when we get to that specific feature. We are not quite there yet, as technically our Pact Magic does not cover our 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th level spells. They're technically part of another feature, although it's very heavily tied to this one. So we'll explain that once we get there. But so how do we rank this? How do we rank Pact Magic, right? It's hard, right? Because we get a lot of really good things. We get some really high level spell slots, right? And eventually we will have 4 of those spell slots when we're super old. We don't get them very early at all. And so you're gonna be very, very limited in how many times you can use these spells. Now, there is a feature that helps to remediate this a little bit, which we're going to be talking about here in just a second when we get to 2nd level. But as far as just this as a feature, it gives us spells, which is huge, right? Normally spellcasting is going to be an automatic 10 out of 10, especially if you're a full caster, which this technically is. Again, it has some weird things with Mystic Arcanum, which we'll get to in just a minute. But overall, I still think this is very, very useful, and I still want to give this a 9 out of 10. It's very, very good. Getting the spell slots back on a short rest is really nice, right? That helps us to significantly increase the number of slots that we have. Does it get us up to the level of what full casters have? No, especially at later levels. Full casters will end up having way more spell slots than you in a given day, even with a short rest thrown in the middle there. You would need a lot of short rests, and most days are not going to have enough time for those short rests in order to get you back unless you're trying to catnap or something like that. And of course, there are specific subclasses that play into that. If you're not doing that, then this could end up causing some issues. But overall, it's still very powerful. I still like having it. At level 2, we get Eldritch Invocations, and this is a huge deal for Warlocks. Honestly, if we didn't have these, I think that the Warlock class would honestly fall apart. Now, there are too many to go into every single one of them, or else this video is going to be forever long. But question of the day, what is your favorite Eldritch Invocation out there? And would you like to eventually see a video where I go through every single one of these Eldritch Invocations and rank them out of 10? I've done that for some other stuff, or at least I've planned to do that for some other stuff, like the Artificer's Infusions, right? Things like that, these kind of auxiliary things, Battlemaster Fighter maneuvers, things like that. I've gone through and I can do some videos on that. So if that's something you'd like to see, then of course let me know down in the comments below. But I'm just going to go through what I think are some of the best ones, and if there's any that I missed, let me know. If there are any that I say that you think are trash, let me know. Just hit me up in the comments down below. Starting off at the top, Agonizing Blast is a huge one, right? Agonizing Blast gives us extra damage on our Eldritch Blast cantrip, which is absolutely huge. We get to add our charisma bonus to those hits, which is great. Of course, that helps because we're going to get multiple beams as this scales, and this is going to add to those beams, which is really, really good. Armor of Shadows is fine, but again, you'll notice now with Armor of Shadows and then moving forward that you can now cast certain spells at will that normally would be leveled spells and cost you spell slots. That's a big deal, right? And that helps to that helps to ease some of that pressure that's on the Pact Magic feature, and that's really why it ranked the way it did, is because Eldritch Invocations really helps to soften the blow of how difficult that can be if you choose the correct ones. And so there are a ton of them that let you just cast a spell, right? Which is really, really cool. There are some that also are very specific and work only with certain types of boons that we have not quite gotten to yet. We will talk about those next, but those are very, very specific as well. And I'm not going to really get into those just because those are super specific and pigeonholed into a build, right? And we will go over those as we go on. Devil's Sight is the next one that I wanted to mention, just because it allows you to see in normal darkness and in magical darkness, which is a huge deal, especially if you're doing darkness strats. So you cast darkness all around, and so normally creatures, even if you have dark vision, cannot see, but you can. So you have free advantage on all your attacks, and all attacks coming into you have disadvantage as long as there's not, you know, True Sight or some kind of other Devil's Sight user, that kind of thing. Eldritch Mind is another standout. Basically gives you advantage on Constitution saving throws to maintain concentration. Really, really good there. Eldritch Spear extends your range of the Eldritch Blast, which is really, really nice. Gaze of Two Minds can be nice. It's kind of like a familiar, but it's with a person. So definitely could come up. I definitely like that. Lance of Lethargy is nice just because that can reduce speed of those that you hit with Eldritch Blasts, which is great. And so yeah, besides those, they're really like you get to cast a spell for free. There are even some that say you can cast it once with a spell slot because it's outside of your normal range. Those are not nearly as good, in my opinion. I would rather have something that I can cast for free at will. That makes a lot more sense to me, even if I have to wait a few levels to get it. So definitely pay attention to all of those. And then, like I said, there are a lot of them that are very specific to certain packs. So things like Thirsting Blade, Protection of the Talisman, things like that are specific to certain packed boons. And so I'm not going to go super in depth into those just because those are very heavily dependent on your build. But overall, how does this rank? This is really great, honestly. These invocations really take the Warlock from could be really bad to, okay, yeah, this works. We can really make this all come together. I really can't give this any less than a 10 out of 10, just because you have so much versatility in how you build your character, and they just keep on getting better and better and better as you scale. For the most part, you start off with 2, and of course we're going to get 8 total by the time we are level 20, which honestly is fine. That amount is more than enough, and I'm really happy with that. So it's really good. The invocations are fantastic. Take every advantage of them that you can, and really use them to customize the Warlock to really what you want to be, and it's gonna help you out so much and make the character feel so much more like your own than others. At level 3, we get the Packed Boons, which I've been talking about a bunch in level 2 stuff, but the Packed Boons are great. There are not nearly as many choices. There are 4 choices currently. Talisman was added somewhat later, but the other 3 have been around from the beginning, and these are pretty cool, right? These can really define your build. If you're a weapon user, you're gonna go Pact to the Blade, and then Chain and Tome and Talisman are kind of up in the air, right? Just because they give a lot of different things. So let's take a look at each of those and of course see how they rank and how they affect the character. So Pact to the Blade comes first, and this allows you to create a packed weapon, and it's any melee weapon that you want with certain restrictions. You do gain proficiency while you have this particular weapon, and it counts as magical for the purposes of overcoming resistance. That is huge at level 3, just because normally you're not going to have a magical weapon at this point. It disappears if it's more than 5 feet away from you for a minute, and you can transform one magic weapon into a packed weapon by performing a ritual as long as we hold that weapon. It takes an hour to do that, and then if we dismiss the weapon, it actually will just disappear into an extra dimensional space, and we can resummon it whenever we want to do that. The weapon stops being our packed weapon if we die, but of course we can get a new one if we need to. Pact of the Chain gives us the Find Familiar spell, which we can cast as a ritual. This spell does not count against our spells that we already know, which is great. And when we cast it, we can choose any of the normal forms, or we can choose Imp, Pseudo-Dragon, Quasit, or Sprite, which are all pretty cool options. We'll talk about that in a second. Additionally, whenever we take the attack action, we can forego one of our attacks and allow our familiar to make an attack as a reaction. For Pact of the Tome, our patron is going to give us a Book of Shadows. We get 3 cantrips from any spell list, and while the book is on our person, we can cast those cantrips whenever we want. If they don't normally appear on the Warlock list, they become Warlock spells for us. And then if we lose our book, we can get it back through a ceremony. With Pact of the Talisman, we get an amulet or talisman or something like that. Think Dr. Facilier, right? The voodoo kind of thing going on, but it can really look however you want. And so when the wearer fails an ability check, you can add a D4 to the roll, potentially turning that into a success. This can be done a number of times per day equal to our proficiency bonus, and we get them back on a long rest. And if we lose the talisman, we can get it back. So all of these are really cool. Now, these do seem pretty basic and don't seem like they offer all that much help outside of maybe Pact of the Chain, right? Pact of the Chain gives us a familiar and we get some new options, which is always going to be great. Tome, maybe, because we get extra cantrips, but the other two seem kind of like, whatever, right? I can make my weapon disappear and reappear, and it's magical, so that's kind of cool, right? The power really comes with the invocations, which again are very build specific and goes back to level 2. So everything works together really well, especially here at these first 3 levels. They are all very much tied together, and the strength comes in the combination, not in just one particular feature. And that's why that makes this really difficult to rank, because they all rely on each other and they all boost each other at the same time. Really, really helpful. For instance, Pact of the Blade doesn't really give us any extra damage or any extra things like that, but then with invocations we can gain extra attack that way, which is great. We can deal extra damage. There are plenty of other ways that we can use that. With Pact of the Chain, we can of course gain a bunch of different actions that our familiar can use through investment of the Chain Master. There's a ton of stuff that that one does. For Pact of the Tome, there are several, and it does a wide variety of things, but Gift of the Protectors comes to mind for me personally, just because that kind of gives relentless endurance to a creature that we choose, which can be really helpful. And then Talisman again is very versatile in what it can do. You know, you can end up applying it to saving throws instead of just ability checks. You can even deal damage back to creatures when the wearer is hit with something. And keep in mind, it says wearer, not you, right? Anybody can wear the talisman and gain these benefits. So you can buff up a party member with one of these things. So keep that in mind as well. So where does all of this end up landing us in a ranking perspective? Again, it's difficult because it very much relies on the invocations for them to be good and vice versa, right? Invocations were a 10 out of 10, and honestly I think I've got to give these a 9 right below it, just because they do rely a lot harder on the invocations than the invocations typically really rely on them. Just the boons are the kind of the prerequisite to some of the better ones, and so that's really the only thing holding them back, but overall they're great. Now comes a stretch of the Warlock that becomes a little tedious. Just we don't get any new features for a while, and then we kind of get a flood toward the end, sort of. Just you'll see what I mean. So 4th level, of course, ASI or feat, nothing crazy there. 5th level, just like any other full caster, new spell level, but no new features. 6th level is a subclass feature, but again, we're skipping that for now. 7th level, 4th level spells, again. 8th level, ASI or feat. 9th level is going to be 5th level spells, no features. And then we get another subclass feature at level 10. So that's 6 levels in a row where we don't get anything new, at least on the class level. It's all subclass reliant. So again, there's not a whole lot to cover on our end here. Now at 11th level, we get Mystic Arcanum, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, and technically this is tied into our Pact Magic feature. But it works a little differently in how we gain spells that are levels 6 and higher. So let's go over this. So whenever we get to this feature, we choose one 6th level spell from the Warlock spell list. We can cast it once without expending a spell slot. and we must finish a long rest before we can do that again. When we gain more Warlock levels, we can choose another spell at the appropriate level. 1 7th level spell at 13th, 1 8th level spell at 15th, 1 9th level spell at 17th, and all of those spells come back when we finish a long rest. So this is the kicker. You only get 1 spell of any given level between 6th and 9th spell levels. That can be pretty harsh, right? Because those are your big boy spells, right? Our normal spell slot progression continues to get better as we are leveling up, but those cap out at 5th level. You don't have 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th level spell slots. Those are only cast through Mystic Arcanum, and you get 1 casting of them per day. Long rest, not short rest. So that can be pretty restrictive in that way and gives a stark disadvantage over other spellcasters. You're still going to get those 5th level spell slots back on a short rest, but 6th and up, 1 casting per day, you do not get them back unless you long rest. So that is pretty restrictive. And so in that way, I've got to drop this back. While we are getting some high level spells, you get 1, and so you better hope your choice is correct, because you can't switch it out until you take another level in Warlock. So that can be a little tough, honestly, so be careful there. I'm gonna give this an 8 out of 10. It's still very powerful, but the restrictions make it kind of difficult for me to really get that excited about it. So unfortunately, that takes a few points off. Now we reach another slog for a while, just because, again, it's just kind of repeat stuff for a while. 12th level, ASI or Feat. 13th level, Mystic Arcanum. For 7th level spells, we get a subclass feature at 14th. 8th level spells for Mystic Arcanum at 15th. ASI at 16th. Mystic Arcanum again for 9th at 17th. At 18th, we just don't get anything. We get an extra Eldritch Invocation, I guess, but that's about it. And finally, our capstone, Eldritch Master. This is not that crazy of a feature, but it definitely is helpful, and I've definitely seen worse. So we can spend 1 minute with our patron and regain all expended spell slots. We can do that once per day. So instead of having to do a short rest, we can spend 1 minute to get back our spell slots. I really wish that it would have been something a little more exciting. While this is nice, right? So we don't have to wait on a refresher. This is still not something we can do in combat because it takes a minute, right? That's not good. That's not good there. It does not affect our Mystic Arcanum at all. It is only from Pact Magic. And so it's a bit restrictive, and it's honestly a pretty underwhelming capstone, to be honest with you. I'd rather just take my cat nap, and I'd rather just gain them back the old-fashioned way, I guess. It's just tough, right? If this could be done as a bonus action, huge, right? It could be done in combat, and we get everything back, and we're good. Doesn't work that way, and that makes this a lot tougher. And so for that, I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. I think that this is just not that great of a capstone, so I don't think we're going to be doing any 20th level builds of Warlock during this series, just because I don't know that it's worth going this far. So what is our overall ranking for the Warlock? The Warlock is really cool, and it is very powerful in its restrictions for the most part, and that's something that I like. I like that they gave it a bunch of power and then scaled it back a little bit with certain restrictions that can still make it fun, right? We have Pact Magic, which gives us all these really cool spells, and a lot of unique ones to just the Warlock, which is also really cool. Now, there are plenty of other spellcasters that can gain access to these spells, and so it makes it a little less exclusive because those are a little more recent additions to everything. But still, there are a lot of exclusives on this list, and that helps this to feel very unique in its flavor. Again, you're working with some kind of evil deity most of the time, and so having these like darker imagery type of things make a lot of sense, right? And I really like how they make that work. There are a lot of really powerful spells on this list, and they are really fun, and Warlock is an absolute blast to play. The first 3 features really carry this class the entire way, and that's both a good and a bad thing, right? You get all of your power in the first 3 levels, and then it scales from there. The problem with that is that you don't get anything new, really, at least from the class itself, past that point, at least anything that is really of note. It is just more spells, and we are scaling the 3 features that we got at the beginning. So it all rides on those 3 features. Are those 3 features good enough to get us a 10 out of 10? No, I gotta say no. I cannot say that this is on the same level as the Bard, for instance. It's just not there, unfortunately. I can't do that. So is it a 9 or does it slip to an 8? And that's kind of the tough debate. I know that a lot of people in the community would say 9. I know a lot of people in the community would say 8. Some might even say lower than that, and in which case I think you might be a hater if you think it's lower than that, because ultimately this is a pretty dang good subclass. Just the free castings of a lot of different things, the way that the boons interact with the invocations are really, really nice and gives you so much customizability in the build. And that is a really big thing that a lot of people don't talk about, is the ability to customize your character to exactly what you want. Most classes are pretty restrictive. This one says, here's a list of several dozen options. Go crazy. And that's really, really cool. And that has to count for something, right? To me, this falls kind of at dead center at about an 8.5. I think it's right between that 8 and 9 slot. So I could see it being a high 8 or a low 9. Because it is a full caster, that's helpful, but it does come with its restrictions, which is a little hurtful, but at the same time, when you look at some of the lower stuff, it tends to outperform them, especially with certain subclasses coming online. With that in mind, I'm willing to round up to a 9 overall. I think that this is worth a 9. It's not worth a 10, unfortunately, and I think it just beats its way out of 8. But let me know what you think about this class down in the comments below. Next week, of course, we begin with the Archfey, I believe, and we will be going from there in alphabetical order. Again, make sure to check out UNPL Season 5. The Week 1 battle goes up tomorrow. It is an absolute banger against a GOAT under the radar who has been around for a very long time, and you will not want to miss that awesome match. But until next time, stay safe out there, stay healthy. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.